Enable your mic if you want to ask questions later on. So I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Jackie Kay as our last session of the SASW Conference 2023, Reclaiming the Social in Social Work. Jackie was born and brought up in Scotland. She's the author of many books, including The Adoption Papers, which won the Forward Prize, Red Dust Road, which I loved, which won the Scottish Book of the Year Award, Trumpet, and the Costa-listed Theory, which I did have to go and check how I was to say this, how you say it, Jackie. I did look that up, Theory, meaning friend, companion, somebody who goes alongside, which I thought was particularly poignant for today. She's the third MACA, or National Poet for Scotland. She's been that. And I think at the moment you're the Professor of Creative Writing at the University of Salford. Have we got that right?
You've got everything right. Yeah, well done.
Fantastic. Jackie's going to talk for about 20 minutes and has agreed to do about 10 minutes of questions at the end. So do start adding to the chat, or then there will be an opportunity to put up hands. But welcome, Jackie.
Oh, thank you, Alison. Thank you for that lovely introduction. And hello, everybody. I can't see all your fine faces at the moment, but hopefully I will a little bit later. So this first photograph of me falling backwards was taken in the garden in Bishopbriggs, where I was the first house I was brought to after I was adopted, aged 5 months. And the social worker wrote to my mum and said that my birth mother had been in touch and wanted to have a photograph of me. So my mum propped me up to take this photograph to send to my birth mother, but just as I was propped up, I fell over. So I'm presuming she didn't send that one and perhaps sent another one, or else it might have made my birth mother a little anxious. But I kind of like that this is the first ever photograph of me, and that I had a social worker kind of involved in the whole thing, because if I look at my life in a circle, it has involved social work all the way through it, actually, from the beginning till now. So my parents, John and Helen Kay, I think we can move on from that picture now and just get them going on a loop now. You'll see different pictures coming up at different times, and I'm not going to try and talk to, yeah, there they are anyway. I'm not going to try and talk to suit the pictures, or I'll get myself in a bit of a muddle. But yeah, my mum and dad, John and Helen Kay, adopted first my brother, who was in a home in Edinburgh, and they just made a chance remark, and when they were told they had no babies, my mum said, by the way, we don't mind what colour that baby is. And the woman said, oh, really? Well, in that case, we have a baby for you. And so they got my brother, and having got him, they said they'd like another child his colour to keep him company. So 2.5 years later, a woman from the Scottish Adoption Agency phoned my mum up again and said, we've a woman coming down from the Highlands, and the father of the baby's Nigerian. And my mum said, oh, we'll have that baby then. And so that was me. But when I was born, I was born with forceps and had this gash down my face, which poses as a cheekbone. And but they thought that I had brain damage, so my mum and dad weren't allowed to adopt me, and were actually told to pick another baby. But they wouldn't, and so they kept on, and they kept visiting me for 5 months until they could get me home to where you saw that first flying backwards picture. And it is interesting that life is a kind of a process, you know, probably for all of us, of going forwards and back, and sometimes simultaneously. And that especially when we're struck by intense emotions of any kind, really, love or grief, that things coincide and things live alongside each other. So I'm just going to start actually by reading this poem, which was in the adoption papers, and it's in the adoptive mother's voice. And that book was a book of poems in 3 different voices: the birth mother, the adoptive mother, and the daughter. I remember it was my first book, and I remember when I wrote it, my dad said to me, have you not got a wee bit of a tip for yourself? Because he thought that it was extremely indulgent writing a book about my own experience. And I said, well, I'm kind of hoping that other people might relate to it. And, you know, luckily for me, they did. So anyway, this is in the voice of the adoptive mother, and it's them, you know, my parents were both very political, and so they were really worried before they had this first social workers visit that they would be deemed eligible. So they rushed around the house, hiding all evidence of their politics before the social workers visit. I thought I'd hid everything, that there was no one giveaway sign left. I put Marx, Engels, Lenin, no Trotsky in the airing cupboard. She'll not be checking up the towels, surely. All the copies of the Daily Worker I shoved under the sofa. The Dove of Peace I took down from the loo. A poster of Paul Robeson saying, "Give him his passport," I took down from the kitchen. I left a bust of Burns, my detective stories, and the complete works of Shelley. She comes at 11:30 exactly. I pour her coffee from my new Hungarian set and foolishly pray she will only ask its origins. Honestly, this baby has been going to my head. She crosses her legs on the sofa. I fancy I hear the Daily Workers rustle underneath her. "Well," she says, "you have an interesting home." She sees my eyebrows rise. "It's different," she qualifies. "Hell, and I've spent all morning trying to look ordinary." A lovely home for the baby. She buttons her coat, all smiles. I'm thinking we're on the home run. But just as she gets to the last post, her eye catches at the same time as mine a red ribbon with 20 world peace badges, clear as a hammer and sickle in the wall. "Well," she says, "to hell with this." "Oh," she says, "are you against nuclear weapons?" "To hell with this, baby or no baby." "Yes," I says, "yes, yes, yes. I'd like this baby to live in a nuclear-free world." Oh, her eyes light up. "I'm all for peace myself," she says, and sits down for another cup of coffee. So you can see from that the social worker was friendly and peace loving, and the social workers were friendly to my mum and dad. That my mum and dad weren't religious, and they were advised by social workers at the time just to say that they were, and just put it down in the form. We just need it down in the form, and they wouldn't put it down in the form because they didn't want to lie about something so important. So it did take them 5 years to properly get accepted as adoptive parents, just from not living near enough a church and not being church going in the late 1950s. So that's a kind of a fascinating thing, but it also makes me think about, you know, paper and what is put down on paper and what is, you know, what you actually see when you meet people. And I think some of the battle that you probably all identify with as social workers is people putting the social into social work, putting the people into the paper, and making people vivid and real before your eyes. And it's interesting to me that life kind of goes on this journey. I'm now 62. I found both my original parents again through the help of different social work type agencies, and I wrote another book about that called Red Dust Road. Again, my family thought that it wouldn't be interesting to anybody else. My brother this time said to me, "Well, I found it interesting, but I doubt anybody else will be interested. I mean, I'm in the book. They're not in the book. So I don't think other people are going to find it interesting." So that's a massive vote of confidence from my brother. But anyway, so that was a fascinating process in itself, finding this original birth father from Nigeria who was a born again Christian, and my birth mother who had been from the Highlands but now living in Milton Keynes, who became a Mormon. And I remember telling my mum that I'd found my mother and that she was a Mormon. And my mum said, "Oh, Jesus, Jackie, that's a pits. Away and have a wee half bottle and forget all about it." And it was really strange because I had grown up, as you do when you're adopted, with various different imaginary images of both my birth parents in my head, and none of these proved to be true. And it showed me just how much a part the imagination really plays in your life when you have unknowns in it, when you have spaces to be filled in, if you like, and forms. That's when the imagination is really, really strong. And I kind of write in Red Dust Road about the imaginary version of both my birth parents as well. But the book really is a love letter to my adoptive parents, because I really did feel and do feel that that they were my real parents. And so when people ask me who your real parents are, I always find it a bamboozling question, because to me, my real parents are John and Helen Kay, the people that took me to Mull on the ferry. That's me and my mum on the ferry to Mull. And when we got to Mull, the local people gathered around me and my brother. My brother was about 6 at the time, and I was 4, and they gathered around my mum and they said, "Do they have the English?" And my mum went, "Oh, aye, they have the English, all right." And then she went, "Bloody cheek, most of them don't have the English," because a lot of the Mull people spoke Gaelic then. So this is a little poem that I wrote Mull, because there's another picture in that bunch of pictures, which is my dad's got a tartan blanket round his shoulders, and he's carrying a staff. And my brother and I are on either side of him, and we're pretending to be Scottish chieftains. So maybe that picture will come up in a minute. But anyway, I'll read you this poem, because this is really a poem where things flip around, and you know, your parents are suddenly old, and it's you parenting them. There's my father, tartan blanket round his shoulder, his staff in his right arm, defending us, his black children, on this island against all harm. And here he is again, walking the pure white sands of Calgary Bay on this same coastline. And it's me holding his hand, come what may. So I took years and years before I managed to write. This is a poem. This is still in a wee piece of paper. It's not in a book like the others. But this will be in my new book coming out in May, called Mayday. And it took me years and years to try and find a way to write about that photograph. I just wanted to write about it, and so that little poems come out of it. Really, the idea that that things swap around. And I remember being on the way back from a family holiday where, you know, I'm driving and my mum and dad are in the back, and we stop at a pub, you know, after having gone through the Cairngorms and a deek, wild, windy day, and kind of Rannoch Moor, and everything's all woo. And I asked them, did they want to get out, stop at a pub and have a wee shandy, and they say, "Oh no, it's too wet, it's too windy." So I go into the pub and I get them a wee shandy, and I bring it out to the car with a bag of crisps, and it was probably the most grown up I ever felt in my life. That's extraordinary role reversal. But I remember later in my mum and dad's life, they had social workers visits to assess them. You know, they kind of get means tested. And they found those visits deeply upsetting. I mean, the first woman I had to put in an actual formal complaint about, because she was so rude and she so didn't treat them as people, and she kept on repeating, "I've just got to get this in this form," and it was just awful. She was like the worst example. None of you will be like that, I know. And then a guy came along, and he was 100 times better, and they became quite friendly with him, and it made the whole experience much more easy, if these later life experiences can be called easy in any way. But I remember having that exact feeling as well in hospital every time either one of them ended up in hospital. And one time they both ended up in Glasgow Royal Infirmary at exactly the same time. And they were in different parts of the hospital. You'll know, if you know Glasgow Royal Infirmary, it's one of the biggest hospitals in Britain. It kind of stretches 4 miles, I think. Anyway, so they couldn't visit each other, but they had a kind porter carried their little love letters back and forth on a trolley. And I kind of imagined that. And so I wrote this poem really that was sparked off by them both being in hospital at the same time, and by people not really being able to see them properly because they were old. And so this poem's called April Sunshine. But actually, just before I read that one, I'll read another one that's a hospital poem, which is called 35. And I was thinking that people kind of obsess over DNA and what you pass down and what's in your genetic line and all of that. But yet to me, my mum and me and my dad and me and my whole family were close in a very, very different way that had nothing to do with sharing features. So this is called 35, and it's a sonnet. It's just after the ward 35 in Glasgow Royal Infirmary. I'll read this one and I think 2 more, and then I'll stop and see what you have to say to me, what you want to ask me. 35. As quickly as you fell ill, quickly you returned, a quip thrown back, a memory uncovered, saline drip, subcut, a journey underwater. You slip into the railed bed, slide under. Outside Glasgow Royal, snow, a thin sheet. Inside your wit, wisdom, make my heart swell, bigger than your water retaining feet. Without this love, nothing could ever be well. A gift the heart wrapped early in this life. The more you give, the more you have to cherish. If I could offer you my veins, I'd gladly use a knife. At times it seems if you go, I too will perish. A mold broke, made a new mother of you. Blood, water, sealed with a kiss, all true. So yes, that was that one. I remember after that operation, the hip operation, when my mum came out of the hip operation, the doctor said to her, Mrs. K, you'd broken your hip. And she said, as quick as a flash, is that right? It's usually only hearts I break. And so she went round as the wit of the ward after that. So I'm just going to read, I think 2 more. And this is April Sunshine that I referred to earlier. And there's yes, there's a red Zimmer. When my mum came out of the hospital that time, I got her a poppy red Zimmer, a bright red, very.
Yes, please. We had a little interlude where I sent people to read. Could Jane Eyre please come to the information desk? And we had a lovely reading from somebody of Fury whilst you were gone. So she was very glad that you weren't here, which I think was deeply unfair, unnecessary, because it was beautiful. So thank you, Harry-Ann.
Thank you for reading it, and that's quite nice. I quite like that idea. I must, that'd be great to have the equivalent of a live reading. If you just drop off and somebody else pops up in your place, it'd just be, it'd be good to be able to do that. That's one of the advantages, I suppose, of Teams. So I was saying about April Sunshine, that I bought my mum this cherry red Zimmer, and when she first got out of the hospital, and in her first trip to the hairdressers with this Zimmer, she said to me, Jackie, you should have seen all the people crowding around me in the hairdressers with that new red Zimmer. She said, talk about Zimmer envy, Zimmer rage more like. And only she could have coined a phrase like Zimmer rage. Anyway, so this is April Sunshine. When the people who've lived all their lives for democracy, survive to see the spring, April sunshine, it's a blessing. It's a blessing. In the hospital, this bleak midwinter, you were just an old woman. You were just an old man. Nobody imagined how you marched against Polaris, how you sat down at Dunoon, stood up for UCS. Nobody pictured you writing to Mandela and 50 other prisoners of South Africa. You were just an old woman. You were just an old man. Nobody knew how you greeted Madam Allende, or sang the songs of Victor Jara, or loved Big Arthur's bravura, Bandiera Rosa, or heard Paul Robeson at the May Day rally. You were just an old woman. You were just an old man. And how just last Saturday you were mad. You couldn't march for peace with Nicola Sturgeon. You say one less missile would subsidize the arts for a century. You say Which politician will stand up for the refugees? You would have struggled there with your new grey stick. You would have walked with your poppy red Zimmer. What do we want? You say, peace in society. Time has not made your politics dimmer. When the people who've lived all their lives for democracy, survive to see the springtime, April sunshine, it's a blessing. It's a blessing. So that was April Sunshine, which I haven't actually read that poem for a long time because my mum and my dad both died in the last couple of years, and that's been such a strange process because it's also made me think about, you know, where I actually belong to, which has been a surprising thing to come, you know, to come through grief, because even just returning to Glasgow, for instance, like I did last week, and the week before I returned to Glasgow, they had I had to return to open a new Jackie Kay Plaza, which was quite bizarre, you know, open a this plaza that's been named after me, that the Strathclyde students voted to name the plaza after me. But even that I found strange, kind of returning to the city, where with my parents no longer in it. And I'm sure that some people there will have had that experience, as they might have had this one, which I'm probably going to finish with, which is called Around the Round Table. And this is a poem about having to kind of clear a house out after somebody has died, and actually thinking about what's left in the house. And that particular house that they brought me and my brother to, they lived in all their lives, so we never really knew any other house. That's me at age 19 and my brother at 21. So he's now 64. And he's very seriously ill as well. So I feel like, yes, it's been a very challenging time. But the thing that I do really find useful, apart from being imaginative and being creative, is to kind of imagine in some way that the conversation goes on with people that you love. I mean, in one of my other poems, Darling, the last two lines of it are, the dead don't go till you do, loved ones, the dead are still here, holding your hands. So this poem's called Around the Round Table, and I just thought it might be interesting to talk about a life circle, if you like, in terms of social work, or putting the social into old people, because the thing that probably angers and annoys me most, really, apart from the way that very young people are treated in the care system, and often through foster care and adoption, and through missing out on different things, is also the way that very old people can be treated. It seems that at both ends of the spectrum, things can go wrong, and when they go right, it's kind of joyous. You feel a huge sense of gratitude, and it restores your faith in humanity. So I'll just finish with this poem, and take any questions that anyone has to throw at me. And Peggy Seeger appears in this poem, the folk singer, and she really did go to their house to sing peace songs. You can ask me about that if you want. Around the Round Table. This is also a new poem that will appear in the new book. You're no longer at your round table, looking out at your weeping willow, but come with me now, wherever I go. It was at this table, not so long ago, when Peggy Seeger came to tea, and you sat singing peace songs, eating scones and jam. Your life played back to you through song, all that belief we shall overcome. And it was here, I remember, I first heard Ailey sing Diamonds and Rust, about her affair with Dylan by Joan Baez. And that line shone even way back then. And if you're offering me diamonds and rust, I've already paid. Though none of us knew what it meant, we sensed a heartache coming down the line like a train heading for the Midwest and the rest. And it was here we had our last round of toast before climbing the 13 stairs to bed, and Mum sang, "Good night, Irene. good night, Irene. I'll see you in my dreams. And Dad sang Coorie Doon, and your beds are now empty, but your house is full of song. And here, Dad sang to Adjua in his fake American accent. I was born in old Wyoming. And Adjua threw back her head and laughed when he got to the line, laugh and laugh, laugh and laugh, and something about a better half. And it was around this table you read the papers and shook your head at the news and said, what a world. What a world. So now I turn to tell you things that have happened, what's going on, as Marvin would have put it, or start singing suddenly, love really hurts without you, as Billy Ocean would have it, wanting it back when the house was full and the table legs shook with songs. When the moon rises over Brackenbrae, I sit at the empty table, looking out into the night and hear Dad singing Ella, say it's only a paper moon. And sat here at the table, your empty places fill and fill, even as tears spill. And I know the difference between make-believe and real. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jackie. Lots of applause and hearts coming up for you there. And I can see that we have some questions in the audience.
Thank you.
Just let me go and find who's got their hands up.
And we've only lost 3 people. That's not bad.
That's very good going. They did say they had other things that they actually do were probably meant to be doing. Now, who did I see? I saw a couple of hands up there, I thought. Jackie's willing to take questions whilst we're waiting for maybe people to put their hands up. Jackie, what does poetry give to you, and what do you think it can do, and why might it be important for social work?
Well, thank you to the people that are making nice comments in the chat. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Victoria. Thank you, Danielle. It's very, very nice to see your names up there. And yeah, thank you, Gillian. Yes, and Ariane and Liz. So yes, poetry means the world to me, really. I think I was brought up going to burn suppers from when I was a little kid. So I already had a taste of the drama really that could be found in poetry, and that haggis could have its own poem, and there could be a spectacular address to it, and that poems could be all sorts. They could be they could accompany you at people's funerals. They could be at people's weddings. They could be said to people when you were in love. That they seem to come along with you at every really important moment in your life. And I just started writing poems really, really early. I think I started writing poems because I did get a lot of racist abuse when I was at primary school. In particular at primary school, it seemed to stop at secondary, so the opposite way around for most people. And so I started writing poetry as a kind of a sanctuary. You know, when people called me names or beat me up, I would just go off and write a revenge poem, and I'd find that inside my own imagination I was really quite strong. But yes, I think I probably wouldn't be alive without poetry. I know that sounds like I'm a bit of a drama queen, and I probably am a bit of a drama queen, but yeah, I do think that it's actually kept me alive, because it's very, very good for your own mental health. And also, if things are difficult and if you find things difficult to express, which most of us do in one way or another, you have to have some other outlet. And my outlet happens to be poetry. Other people's might be music, other people's might be painting, other people's might be walking in nature, cooking, dancing, sport. Whatever the outlet, there has to be another outlet, because we live in our heads in a particular way so much that it's quite good to free our heads. And I find poetry quite freeing, because you're thinking associatively. You're thinking in rhythms and rhymes. You're thinking in images. It's a kind of a puzzle with language, and just the attention to the detail of the puzzle helps, even when you're writing about something very difficult like racism or grief.
Thanks, Jackie. And I think there's a strong core of social workers who do use poetry in that way, and we've had a few of them on today, which is fantastic. Sarah Anderson's got a hand up. Sarah Jackson, can you unmute Sarah Anderson?
I think I am.
Great, thank you.
Hi Jackie, I am blown away. Poetry is not really something that comes easy to me because I'm dyspraxic, but I think that's going to have to change, because listening to you, how do you verbalize like how amazing that was to hear? I guess I'm just wondering if you would be so kind to give like a top tip to me. I live in rural Scotland, predominantly a very white area, really white area, and I think we don't talk about like subjects that you've raised enough here, because we don't encounter subjects like you've raised, and I think it's almost like people actually have got a fear of difference, and that fear of difference actually becomes racism and institutional racism at times as well. You know, we're almost asking people from different cultures questions that we wouldn't ask white people for some reason. I don't know why. So I guess like I'm a social work student and I'm about to qualify. What tips would you give, if any, about making sure that I keep my mind open and happy to question, but also happy to just love and bring empathy in?
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, Sarah, and good luck with completing. And I think it's really interesting, you know, what you're saying about this. There's a massive difference between rural and urban Scotland, and a massive difference between rural and urban anywhere, actually. It makes a massive difference. I remember when I was Macker, going around lots of rural Scotland, and that was one of my main goals, was actually, as Macker, was to go and visit people in places where poetry didn't usually come to, and that was really important. I remember doing a reading on Uist and in the Hebrides, and being really surprised to see the big lesbian turnout for me that night. And I said to the woman in her middle 70s who was driving me around the next day, driving Miss Jackie, I said to her, I was really surprised last night to see the big lesbian turnout for me. And she said, without missing a beat, we managed to hang on to our lesbians. We lose our gay men, mind you. They go off to the mainland. And I remember thinking that was just kind of pure brilliant. You know, I wouldn't have heard a sentence like that spoken in Scotland even 5 years before, and certainly not by somebody in their middle 70s. And I thought, gosh, you know, Scotland's really changed from the days when I was 16 and Anne Kerr shouted out in the art class, Miss, Jackie's a lazy. And the art teacher turned to me and went, well, are you, Jacqueline? To my surprise, are you a lesbian? And I had to sort of somehow deal with that. You know, we live in a world where we respond to what we encounter. But we've also got to try and keep, as you really said so eloquently there, Sarah, in our mind, and keep our minds open to what we don't encounter, and to keep our minds also open to the idea that there are people of all different colours, of all different sexualities, of all different ways of defining themselves in this world that we live in, and that they inform our practice, if you like, absent or present, in the actual street or in the actual room or on the actual island. They inform how we behave. And you know, I had great early lessons in that, because I grew up in an all-white area. Really, there was only really me and my brother, and all my teachers were white, and they often came out with things that were really shockingly racist. Some of the time they really didn't know that they were. You know, like, you know, you'd be practicing for a dance and I wouldn't get the dance steps right, and the teacher would turn around and say, I thought you people had it in your blood. And she wouldn't have thought of that as being a racist thing, but it was really, really, you know, distressing. So I think, you know, Scotland is changing, and we just need to keep on changing with it. We need to keep reading. I mean, reading is a great way to read different Black poets, Black writers from all different backgrounds. It keeps you thinking about experiences outside of your own. It allows you to travel while still being in rural Scotland. It allows you to travel sitting in your seat where you are now, for instance, Sarah. You know, so I just think just keeping an open mind. But I think the main thing is that we need to be able to ask questions like yours without fear, and we need to not be. So we live in a very judgmental society now, where everybody jumps and there's these pile-ons all of the time, and people then become very afraid of trying to just ask or express something in case. And I think that that's a really a bad thing in our society. I think that we need to move ahead from that. I don't quite know how we achieve that, but I think that social media and the ways that we have of suddenly judging everything has made things really, really difficult. So that's my short answer to what could have been a very, I could speak for an hour on that, but I know that there's other people with questions possibly, so I hope that helps. And gave you a laugh at the same time. The lesbians of Uist. I've got to write that poem. The grand old lesbians of Uist. Could be a song. Grand old lesbians of Uist.
Absolutely. I look forward to that one. I can see that Angela Simpson's got a hand up. Angela. You might have to unmute yourself.
There we go, unmuted. As a fellow adopted person, Jackie, I just sort of want to ask you, do you feel extra special because you were chosen?
Oh, hello, Angela. Yes, that was the story that my mum told me, and probably you were told as well. My mum said, we chose you. Other people had to take what they got.
my story is slightly different. Apparently, I chose my adopted parents because I, by all accounts, put my hands up to my dad, who wore glasses. Was the only person in glasses that I never cried at.
Oh, that's lovely. Oh,
and
were you in a hospital or a home, or?
No, I was adopted through the Catholic Rescue Society. My parents were older parents. They were my dad was in his 50s, my mum was in her 30s, so I was very lucky to be adopted by them at that point, because I think most other agencies wouldn't have looked at older parents at that point. And I was 5 months old when I was placed with my adoptive parents, so very similar to yourself. And the story that was told to me after the legal process in court, apparently the sheriff, or the judge as it was then, I was in England, turned to my parents and said that I looked like a very well looked after and happy child, and they saw no reason not to grant the adoption.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting thing, because my mum used to talk about that a lot, that there was still 6 months, even after they got you, they had 6 months to wait before it was final. And at any point, birth mother could actually change her mind and come back for you. So one of my poems in the adoption papers is called The Tweed Hat Dream, where the adoptive mother has this dream that the birth mother just turns up in the doorstep and claims the baby back. But I think that kind of uncertainty that adoptive parents have to go through must be really, 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 really challenging. And it's kind of strange the way in which everyone can be linked in that process and yet not be linked in a way. I remember that my birth mother died actually the year that I became MACA in 2016, and my mum was very upset, even though she'd never actually met her, just because she was the woman that had, her sorrow had been my mum's joy. That's how she put it. And when the diabetic nurse came to do my mum's insulin that day, my mum was crying, and she said to her, "What's the matter with you today, Helen?" And my mum said to the diabetic nurse, "My daughter's mother's died." And that single sentence, "my daughter's mother's died," is such a complex sentence, and it tells you such a lot about it. And if the diabetic nurse hadn't been somebody who took her seriously, she might have thought that she had kind of, some sort of dementia. But no, it's the truth. My daughter's mother died.
Yeah, that's very true. Just a quick final thing. How did your adoptive parents or your parents feel about you going to search for and find your biological parents?
Well, my mum was always really curious, and she was the kind of person that encouraged me. She always said if she was adopted, she'd want to know. And she was kind of on the case with me, At 17, we went to the Highlands because we knew that my birth mother had come from a cottage in Nairn. So we went there and hid behind things. And my mum pretended to be a nurse because we knew my birth mother had been a nurse. And when we got back and told my dad this story, my dad was really furious with my mum and said, "You don't know what could have uncovered and whatever." But so my mum was always, she just really was really curious about both her children and wanted to know the stories behind my brother and me. And we both found our original families and both found out things about them that were disturbing and difficult and strange. But my dad was he just saw his children, his adopted children, as his children, and he didn't really like the idea of there being anyone else in the picture at all. He found it disturbing, so he didn't like it. And I remember there's a bit in Red Dust Road where I write about that, and I showed him the proof of the book before it was actually published to make sure that he was happy with it. And it says, and he got to this bit in the proof and he went, "Why would I be jealous just because you've gone to find your father in Nigeria when I wasn't even jealous when you found your birth mother and she's in this country and he's all the way in Nigeria?" And my mum said, "Because it's another father, John." And my dad said, "Well, can you put in your book, my dad disputes this?" So I did. I found a way to put my dad disputes this in the book. But yeah, he did definitely find it disturbing. I mean, he was supportive and he was really, really proud of me, but he just didn't really like the idea. He just wanted me to stop banging on about adoption, really, because it then meant that everybody was thinking of him as an adopted father rather than just a father, and he just wanted to be a father, didn't want to be seen as an adopted father. So he'd always coming up with people like he'd say, "See, so-and-so, just found out the other day she's adopted. You never hear her speak about it." And that was like, that's what I was supposed to do. Yeah. Any other questions? I think we've time for 2 more because I don't want to keep you up too long because I know you were expecting to go home a while ago. And some of you have had to leave.
Okay, I've got a couple here that we thought, which people might enjoy. So what experiences or relationships have you found the hardest to write about?
I found it hardest to write the memoir Red Dust Road, just because it's very difficult to write a memoir when there are people alive. You feel it's ethically a minefield. It's difficult to decide what to say and, even more importantly, what not to say and what to leave out. So that was definitely the most challenging and frightening. I just was worried all the time. I mean, I really, really found it terrifying. I find writing poems not frightening, because even if I'm writing about something upsetting, there's usually a way around it. The poetry form itself will help help me find a way around it. But yes, and I find it hard writing novels. I've written one novel, Trumpet, but I find it very, very hard to write another one. Any others? Oh, you've all gone quiet. Can't hear you anymore.
Sorry, I managed to mute myself. It always happens at least once in an event. So whilst you were away, Jackie, I shared it was a Radio 4 excerpt of you doing Would Jane Eyre come to the information desk? So, and one of my team has asked the question, and I hope people maybe had a chance to listen to it. But if you don't, this question's pertinent to that. Go back in the chat and listen to it afterwards, which is, and given our continuing concern about the political approach, shall we say, to immigration, what did happen to Bertha?
What did happen to Bertha? Well, Bertha's
at Heathrow Airport. Yes.
Yeah. Well, it really is true that I was at Heathrow Airport, and the message did come over the tannoy. Would Jane Eyre come to the reception desk? That was the inspiration for the poem, because it seemed so bizarre, and it makes you think about time again and these kind of collisions of time that I was talking about at the beginning of the wee talk. But no, there wasn't any. All the rest of the poem was imagined. But I was just thinking of Bertha in the original Jane Eyre, and then in Jean Rhys's Wide Sargasso Sea, she follows it up with an extraordinary version of what happens to a mad woman of colour in Wide Sargasso Sea. And the first sentence of Wide Sargasso Sea is they say when trouble comes, close ranks, and so the white people did. And so I was just thinking, you know, what would a Black woman coming from the Caribbean, who's, you know, who's a couple of 100 years old, what would her experience be like at Heathrow now? And so I was just trying to write about immigration and how unwelcome this country has become.
So thank you very much. I think, yes, we always want to hear the end of the story, for which, of course, there's that's maybe for us to work out.
Yes. Yeah, I think the good thing is that there isn't really any right answers. You know, whatever you've imagined happened to Bertha happened. I like the idea that I write the poem or the book, but then the reader comes in, and if your work is open enough, people will find a way into your house of fiction and be able to open windows themselves and discover rooms or cupboards or things that you didn't even know was in the house. And that to me is my favorite aspect of being a writer, when somebody comes up and says that it resonated with their life, that they found something in it or something meant something to them that you hadn't actually intended in that way, but you see the sense of. A few years ago, I was around Christmas time, actually, I was in John Lewis in Glasgow, and this man came up to me and he said, "Excuse me interrupting you in your private life," which sounded to me very quintessentially Glaswegian in its kind of odd formality. "But are you Jackie Kay?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, I really loved Red Dust Road, Hen. Can you write me a chapter every Christmas so as I can know how everyone's getting on?" and I really like the idea of, you know, a Christmas chapter. I might take him up on it one day.
It would be, yes, far more entertaining than the round robins, the old round robin tradition. I don't know if that's still going, but we would love that, Jackie, if you were to do that. So we will encourage you. I think it's probably time to come to an end. So thank you so much, Jackie, for that. We're now at the end of our conference today. What's been clear to me over through this morning and through the workshops, because I popped into lots of them, is the value that social workers place on relationships. Our own, the ones we have with people who need support, but even more important, the relationships that people who we work with have with their friends and family, and who often they are supporting in turn. I tried to find an easier way to write that. It maybe needs to be a poem, Jackie, which is about that, you know, if we all sit down in a circle on each other's knees, we can kind of stand up, we support each other somehow. You know, the fabric and focus of our lives is relationship. It's about our interconnectedness and the mutuality of love and care in a healthy society. So thank you, Jackie. Thank you to all the presenters today. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I hope you got as much out of the day as I have. Again, I'll mention the campaign that George has put into the chat there. This is our campaign. We've gone live just this week, which is called One Deal for Social Work, which is looking for a national approach to fair, not just pay, but conditions for social workers, so that we have the time and the capacity and the support and the supervision and the leadership and everything that we need in order to do the work the way that we know people need us to do it. So please support that. We've got quite a few upcoming events. For those of you who are students and newly qualified social workers, we've got a forum on the 7th of December. For our mental health officers, there's a couple of offers coming up. On Friday, the 1st of December, there's a 4 Nations community practice for mental health officers and their equivalents in other nations. And also booking for our mental health officers conference is open now, and that will take place on the 28th of February. So do hold the date there and do go and register, please. For those of you who are interested in influencing public policy, quite a few people this morning mentioned the Social Work Policy Panel, which is we Secretariat and work with Social Work Scotland and the Office of the Chief Social Work Advisor, which links social workers in direct practice to our policymakers in government. Our next one, which is on SDS, is on the 12th of December at lunchtime, 12:30 to 1:30. Something for you to listen into there. You can eat your sandwiches. That's why we love it when people come and eat their sandwiches and have a cup of coffee and maybe sit somewhere quiet and have a bit of a break. And finally, the BASW UK, so the UK part of the British Association of Social Workers, is going to take place this year in Edinburgh. And that's on the 18th and 19th of June, and that'll be at Dynamic Earth. It'll be a hybrid conference, so people can join online or in person. We'd really love you to come along, and it's a great opportunity for us to all get together face to face while the UK conference is in Scotland. I want to remind you some of the other offers that we have for everybody. Every social worker and social work student in Scotland can get 3 free coaching sessions from the Social Work Professional Support Service, which is funded by Scottish Government, to use for whatever you want. Doesn't need to be work. It can be personal, it can be growth, it can be change in your life, but there's an opportunity there for all social workers and students to use the professional support service. And finally, it's a little, I suppose, coming to my sales pitch, which is, if there are people here, social workers who are not yet members of BASW, please consider joining. You can get advice and representation, you'll get continuing learning, professional development opportunities, the chance to influence policy director, or you support us to be active on your behalf. And there's a link in the chat to more details about memberships for that. So that's social work students and social workers. Finally, thank you. Thank you to everybody. I hope you have a lovely, peaceful evening. Thank you to our sponsors, the SSSC. Hope to see you again soon, and do keep in touch if there's anything we can help with. Scotland@basw.co.uk. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.